Oi, oi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Good to have you here as always. So this week, I'm talking about skinheads. Surprise, surprise. So what do you think when you hear the word skinhead? You think evil, racist, violent, bunch of young thugs in boots and braces going around hurting people? Yeah, well, didn't start out that way. It really didn't. So let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about skinhead culture, where it started, how it became racist, and what it is now. Got my coffee. If you want to know how to buy me a coffee, all the links are in the description below. All right, let's get into it. Skinheads to boneheads. So where did it all start? Where did the skinhead culture actually begin? Well, it began in England in the 1960s, mostly in industrial towns like Birmingham. A lot of factories, a lot of industry, and, a lot of really hard working class guys, who just needed a release from their day, A lot of bands came out of Birmingham too, Black Sabbath is one of them, my favorite. But skinhead culture grew out of that, and music played a massive part of that culture in the beginning, because all these working class guys, they would go out after work, normally in their work gear, boots, rolled up jeans with braces, and they had shaved heads, because you don't want hair getting caught up in machinery. This culture grew out of that, out of the working class, and the music of the time was a mixture of mod and Jamaican rude boy style music, which had all come over to England during the Windrush generation. And so it started to flourish. And, early skinheads embraced music like Prince Buster, Desmond Decker, Toots and the Maytals, all northern soul music. Had an incredible energy, and they were drawn to that. And then, of course, the early fashion started growing out of that. And again, like wearing all that industrial clothing, but they wanted to be sharp, because the rude boys, they were sharp dressed. Now, skinheads were the same, and it was Ben Sherman's, Fred Perry's, Doc Marten boots, Levi jeans rolled up, And so that grew because it was a great culture and a great fashion style. So in the 70s, skinhead culture really flourished, especially with ska and reggae being so popular at the time. But then in the 70s, punk also started becoming an influence, especially in the skinhead movement. And a lot of these young skinheads, I guess I've always said, they're full of energy, full of anger in a lot of ways. They're just getting that aggression out. And music, especially that kind of music, and metal's the same. It's about young guys getting their aggression out, and young girls too. I ain't gonna leave the ladies out. But it was all about energy. And ska and reggae was uplifting. Punk was also very uplifting, but in a different way. But it was also bringing a message. That's when things started to change a little bit, because a lot of punk music was anti-establishment. It was anarchistic. And a lot of these skinheads did actually hold these ideals in the beginning, It was, fuck the system, fuck your society. Hey, we're rebelling. This is our lives. This is the way we do things. Punks went to that next level. But then there was the music, and the music became a huge influence on the skinhead culture. The bands like The Clash, Sham 69, they all had influence on early skinheads. But then a lot of ideology and a lot of hate started kind of seeping its way into these movements, into these cultures, and the skinhead culture kind of really started taking it on. A lot of racism came into it, a lot of political beliefs, and then, of course, the violence. Some of the clashes, with the punks, with skins alongside them against the system and against immigrants. Yes, late 70s, early 80s, that's when it started to really change. So by the early 80s, the skinhead culture, it was still there, but it wasn't as dominant as it was in the 70s, for many it was a fashion culture, so they kind of fell off. But those ones who were involved, those ones who were anarchistic or, anti-establishment, they hung on. And many held on to that culture because, it was their life, it was part of their life, Rude boys forever, right? Early 80s in England, it was a pretty horrible time, under Thatcher, and, unemployment was massive, everyone was living in poverty. There was a lot of despair, and it was pretty bleak. Politically, a lot of parties started springing up, in opposition to what was going on. They saw a way for them to kind of push their racist and nationalistic agendas, as many of these groups do. When they see an opportunity, they'll jump on it. If they can jump onto the back of something and push a racist agenda, they absolutely will. And this is what happened with the skinhead movement. National Front mostly started recruiting from skinhead groups. These disenfranchised youth who are angry, we can use these kids as soldiers, we'll use them for our cause. And they did. And it started to spread, because now these kids who were just having a hard time in life, they felt they had a purpose, they had a direction, they had a cause to follow behind. And that's when it became dangerous. But it was still changing. There was still the music, and the music was always a huge part of it, but that had started to change too. A lot of the early skinhead bands in the 70s and 80s weren't racist, but they were kind of anti-establishment. They were more punk-like. And then you had oi bands like Cock Sparrow, Cockney Rejects, and even Last Resort. They weren't nationalistic bands at all. They weren't racist bands, but they kind of got lumped in with it, which of course didn't really help with the public image and perception of skinheads, which was at this time worsening because there were a lot of violent clashes. In the early 80s, mid 80s, and even up into the late 80s, there were a lot of clashes with groups like Antifa, far left protesters, of course, there were many, many fights. So the far right was growing, and they had their foot soldiers and these skinheads. And of course, that started to grow even more. And so when it came to public perception of skinheads, by this time, around about the 80s into the 90s, it had really started to change a lot. That's when the racist skinhead movement really kicked off and started spreading around the world. Now, some of my first exposure to skinheads was in Christchurch in New Zealand in the 80s. Now, Christchurch at that time was a hotbed for racism and racist violence, mostly through skinheads. So this was my first exposure to skinheads in my life. I didn't know anything about the history or the culture or anything like that. A skinhead was just a racist skinhead. That's all I knew of it. I didn't even know anything about the music, because the skinheads that I knew in Christchurch didn't listen to oi, didn't listen to punk. They didn't even talk about it. They were just there for the racism. By this time, like I said, public perception had really changed of skinhead culture, and it had started on that downhill slope into what it became now. But then, of course, when I moved to Australia many years later, I got involved with skinheads in Australia. I've talked about it in many of my videos. But I started seeing a different side of the culture, because a lot of the skinheads in Australia at the time loved the history and they loved the original culture, which is kind of weird to me, So this was my first exposure to it. And I started researching it more and kind of fell in love with the original culture. I fell in love with the music, that's for real. I'm a huge fan of ska. Oi, not so much, NS skinhead music, definitely not. It's horrid. But putting on Madness or the Specials or any of that kind of music, oh man, it really gets me moving. Stop your messing around. So I discovered what this culture was really about, and I started looking into it more. And then I started realizing that modern skinheads really, they don't really define themselves as skinheads as such. Like, they call themselves skinheads, hammer skinheads. They didn't look like skinheads. Like all my brothers in the club, all the guys that I knew, we didn't look like skinheads. I mean, most of us had shaved heads. In fact, we had to have shaved heads to be a part of it. But we're clean cut. We didn't wear Ben Sherman's, Fred Perry's jeans, boots, and braces all the time. We wore casual. In fact, I wore gold and, just ordinary t-shirts. A really different look into that culture. that had been hijacked massively. In recent years, I have seen a decline in skinhead activity, or racist skinhead activity. I keep close tabs on it, and I know it's gotten harder and harder to be a skinhead these days, especially after incidents like the Christchurch terror attack, which wasn't carried out by a skinhead, but it was carried out by a terrorist who was linked to all the organisations, including all the skinhead movements and all the National Socialist and right-wing movements in Australia. So he was very much part of that world, but he had done what many of the others had done. They'd gone to the extremes, so they wanted to go incognito. So they grew their hair out, didn't look like skinheads. So it was never about a part of that culture. It was never about being a skinhead. Modern skinheads are about racism. And that's why many modern traditional skinheads today refer to Nazi skinheads as boneheads. Now, racist skinheads don't care about the image. They use it to intimidate. Shaved head, covered in tattoos, looking scary. They use it to intimidate people. It's not because they love that culture. I mean, some of them do. Don't get me wrong. There are many racist skinheads out there who love the traditional Oi culture. You know, they love the music, you know, because they grew up with it. It was all part of it, especially in the beginnings, you know, beginnings of, you know, the racist skinhead movement. There wasn't a lot of music around, so they listened to a lot of the older music. But it's changed nowadays. It is absolutely changed. Even a lot of organizations who are traditional, you know, like racist skinhead movements have changed their ways as well. Not necessarily a good thing. I mean, it's great for the skinhead culture overall. We need to take it back, and we need to take it back to where it was. It was a beautiful culture, and I have seen a lot of rise in modern skinhead culture, traditional skinhead culture, Oi, which is great to see. I see so many videos, especially here in Southeast Asia, you know, rude boys, boot boys, you know, skin birds, all dancing to, you know, Cocksparrow and Cockney Rejects and Madness, you know, and really embracing that traditional skinhead culture. There was even a rude boy meetup just recently. I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was at a pub. A whole bunch of the old rude boys and skinbirds all got together, and, you know, it was amazing to see. And that's what we need people to see and to realize, that the skinhead culture isn't about racism. It's not about nationalism. It's not about hatred. It's not about violence. Okay, a little bit. You know, I'm not going to say those skinheads are perfect angels, but hey, you go to any event, any gig with a room full of young guys, full of energy, full of testosterone, it's going to let a little bit of argy-bargy. It's not done out of hatred, though. It's just in the moment, okay? And it's just that kind of energy, that kind of world. There's also love amongst all that. You go to a skinhead gig, a trad skin gig, someone falls down, everyone will pick them back up. Everyone's friends. The music unites them, okay? And the culture is uniting them as well. There was quite a few organizations that actually came about because of the racist skinhead movement. One of them is SHARP, which means Skinheads Against Racial Prejudice, which is one of the earliest anti-racist skinhead movements. It's worldwide, reaching out to people and making them understand that this way of life isn't the way to go. Being a part of a scene or a movement or a culture like that, that's been appropriated, that's definitely not right. So there you go. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of a better understanding of skinhead culture and where it started and where it all went wrong and where it got hijacked and where it is today. So next time you see a skinhead on the street, you know, if he doesn't look like he's wearing anything racist, if he's wearing like a nice, you know, Fred Perry and a nice, you know, bomber jacket, he looks clean cut, he's got cherry docks on and nice turn-ups and braces and he's smiling and happy, go say oi, go oi, 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 how are you, brother? And hey, go check out some of the music. There's some great bands out there, trust me, go check it out. So many of them have a message of unity and love. And that's what we need. No more hate in this world. Alrighty, so that's it for me for another week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you being here, as always. And hey, if you're new to the channel, please feel free to give this video a big like, subscribe down below, there's a little button there, and hit the little bell next to it that says notifications, because that's important. So then you'll get to know when I've got new videos coming out. Got to stay tuned, right? But, and also if you ever want to support me, support the channel, many different ways you can do it. Coffees are the best way. Merchandise, yeah, I do merch. Patreon, all that good stuff, or you can even just give us a super like on this video. That'd be much appreciated. But see you next week, folks. Have a great day. Stay safe and strength through Oi. Peace out, y'all.